What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Long Box Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
As always, catch us on all of your socials. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that cool stuff. We're everywhere, personally and show-wise. So, you can hit us up on either of those.
Airware.
Of course, as always, catch our extra show, the wonderful Film Alchemist podcast. Actually, honestly, it's becoming like our new fave because I got to tell you, we had such a blast this last month preparing for October.
Yeah.
Griff, tell us
so
what's going
down.
on.
Guys, this is October's Eve. You guys should be getting this podcast October 1st. If you jump on over to Film Alchemist, we are beginning the most epic horror movie journey you will be getting. And Alex is going to kill me, but I think I'm adding one more film, so we'll have a horror movie every weekday of October, right? Every Nightmare on Elm Street, every Friday the 13th, The Lighthouse, Parasite, 3 from Hell, and on Halloween Day itself, Freddy vs. Jason. So while you're looking up the Long Box Session, wherever you find us, leaving a rating and review, jump over to the Film Alchemist, do the same, and be ready for all the fucking horror movies.
Guys, we bought extra space on Libsyn this month to make sure that we could cater all these episodes. Like, it's going to be awesome. So
yeah, I actually got caught with Sam. I've been doing so many. My brain is like addled with murders. I've seen all. Yeah. Like, I am Todd Phillips walking defense of the Joker movie, right? Because, like, if anyone has seen more murders than me this month, I would be shocked. But, no, guys, it's fun. Also, we're back on YouTube at Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S and an end on the end. So, we're getting our technical stuff worked out, but we have some videos already up, and you can find us there if you want to see our beautiful, hairy faces as well.
If you're watching on YouTube, I'm sure you'll see Are we doing a button this time? Can I do the random point some direction?
Let's just get to business, man. We got stuff to talk about.
Yeah. I want to talk about, I read some really cool shit this week, but I know you did too, because we got a shout out on our Instagram, and I want to talk about your book first. So you should go.
All right, guys. This is an Image book, Murder Falcon. Look at how fucking gnarly.
I love the artwork.
Well,
dude.
I said
the
this,
artwork is kick ass,
dude. It's great. It's an Image book. Let's see here: Daniel Warren Johnson, Mike Spicer. It's one of those things. They always tell you don't judge books by its cover. That's nonsense. Everyone I know who buys books, I am like a cover fanatic, right? I love editions. I love when the pages, that uneven page thing in novels, right? I like weird stuff, right? I have an Alien edition I bought just because the pages were blue, whatever. So right. I always judge books by its cover. And this one is just one of those covers you look at and you're like, only in comics. Murder Falcon with a giant, like, kind of American badass falcon with a giant metal arm and another dude just shredding a guitar. It's every fucking thing you actually want this book to be. But kind of in the vein of I Kill Giants, God Country, things like that, there's a very tight and emotionally wrought subtext that takes you through. So essentially it's nice. When you're dealing with your worst shit in life, you just go to the best thing in life, which is the heavy metal, and you start shredding, and some kind of a mythological beast avatar will pop up for you. One guy's was a mastodon, right? There's like a kraken thing. So I've been thinking all week, what would be my metal creature that I would summon if I was in battle? I think I'm going giant gorilla with octopus tentacles.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, that's what I was like. That kind of hits my two favorite animals. I also like bears, right? So maybe if it had gorilla arms, bear body and head, and then tentacles. That would be my metal animal.
That's pretty good.
It's just, guys, it's one of those things in comics. We talk about this a lot. Because there's no real restrictions, and you kind of take away the absurdity, right? Sometimes if you're watching a movie and things are too wacky and out there, it can get hard, right? Yeah. Sometimes you're reading a novel, they have to explain so much to get you to understand the world. It can take a little effort. Comics, with their blend of words and image, can jump you to these fantastically absurd places so fast and buy you in immediately. Totally. And this book is just so vibrant, and it's just one of those comics, like, this is so much fun. But that emotional understory, I guess it's actually kind of an overstory. It's the whole thing, right? The whole thing is that story. It's just so good, man. It had me actually in tears. Like, when I finished the last couple pages, I was in tears, man. It's a phenomenal fucking book. Another Image delight. You guys should go out and pick it up.
Man, I think that's kind of one of the benefits of Image Comics in general. It's the thing I love the most is like from its inception, it's been about the creator-owned property, but to the point where like, yeah, we've had the Mark Millars and the Robert Kirkmans of the world like break out and make some great stuff, but you still get like shit like Monstrous and Bitch Planet, Witches, Deadly Class. Like I love. That's why I love Image Comics, and I always know like whenever I go to the shop or whenever I go to like the Iliad, I always know that I'm gonna be able to grab something weird. Like a couple of weeks ago, I went out. I found there's a second issue and a second edition. I had no idea. Second volume of this book I picked up called She-Wolf by I can't remember I know the last name's Tomasi, I believe, but like it's this very weird sort of like almost storybook drawn like psychosexual werewolf book kind of. It's very strange. It's right up your alley, honestly. But like I didn't even know there was a second edition, but I absolutely love I love the idea, but like Image Comics, like their whole philosophy is you own the copyrights to your stuff, which is really, really cool. But like, again, you're right. Anytime you see it on movie,
the creator is Rich Tommaso.
Rich Tomasi, that's what it is. Thank you. Yeah, like anytime you see it on, like, I mean, I would say probably one of the greatest examples of something that I thought was going to be would ever be way too weird to get translated, but just works so perfectly in comics for me is like Chew.
Yeah,
like Chew to me is like a really, really, really good. Like, there's no way anyone would ever be able to adapt this properly, but man, does it work in comics. And it's so fucking weird and creepy, but I still absolutely love the hell out of it. Like, all kinds of books. I love Image Comics. They always, and you know, Murder Falcon's no different, man. Murder Falcon's a great example of what they do best.
Well, Murder Falcon to me is it's my new thing that I have adored in comics kind of since my mid-20s, right? Because I was really superhero heavy for a long time. Then I was kind of Garth Ennis and horror book heavy. But what I found now as I'm aging a little bit, what I love about Murder Falcon specifically and kind of Image as a whole, they do the best versions of this. Them and 1 Second publications. It's the :01. I'll have to look it up. Fuck. And Top Shelf does it too. But they have this thing where everyone has a really personal, emotional, gut-wrenching story to tell.
Yeah.
And so what these books have found a way to do is, how do I tell my kind of emotional trauma that we can all relate to, but, you know, those are fucking heavy, man. Like, that's a hard thing to sit through sometimes. And just sit and dwell in that. And like, how can we add the fun, awesome things about fantasy, sci-fi, horror, comic books in general that we love and are so fun, and, you know, use that as kind of the tortilla, and then the fucking emotional journey becomes this extra savory, awesome mix of, you know, all the cheeses and the meats and the lettuce and the creams and salsas. And so it becomes
what is this
this
accent
super.
You're using for this burrito analogy?
This is my hungry griff. That's my hungry griff voice. That's how I start talking.
It was very Italian there for a second.
As you know, I'm an expert at voices, obviously. So I could give you an exact region, but I think it's more fun if you figure it out for yourself.
I appreciate the provincial guessing.
Man. But I love books like, again, this, God Country, I Kill Giants are kind of the three big ones that are jumping to mind right away. Yeah. But it's just, here is an emotional, hard to deal with story that so many of us can relate to. Now let's have some fun. Let's deal with it's kind of the celebration of, you know, life in general, right? Things are going to get rough. Things are going to get bad and heavy for all of us, man. But at the end of the day, we live in a world where there are things like Murder Falcon, so we can all get through it.
Yeah. No,
Image does that book so fucking well.
It's funny you bring this up. I was actually reading an interview today with Brian Bendis, and it was done probably a couple of months after he had to deal with this like literally life-threatening MRSA infection he got. It was horrible, man. Like he almost died. He was like, he had temporary blindness in one of his eyes. Like, this is a whole thing. But he was talking about how it really changed like the end of his run with the Miles Morales Spider-Man, and how he's like, I did what I tell all my students to do, is like, put your pain on the page. Like, do what is painful, like take the things that are hurting you or take the things that are emotionally resonant to you right now and put it all in your writing. And it was fascinating to read that because it's something I didn't even think about. And then I realized like the last issue of Miles Morales Spider-Man that he wrote was literally about Miles Morales gets an infection and he goes to the hospital and he wakes up and like all these different superheroes sort of showing up and being caring for him, saying, "Hey, it's okay, you'll get through this." Is all kind of thing. It was very interesting. It's interesting you bring this up today because it's also one of my favorite. Like, it is sort of this weird subgenre of like, I don't know how to I guess overarching mythology with like cripplingly terrifying real world consequences. I guess
it's all.
I'm not really.
This
sure.
is the thing, right? Like, it's the classic. We can all stare into the abyss. None of us want the abyss to stare back. It's hard, man. But if we look into the abyss and we see a giant falcon fighting a kind of flesh monster, while we add in some Dio and other cool shit, then it's all right. It's just all right, and that's what I think is cool too, is that we've hit this place in comics, and again, a lot of really good writers have done this with the superheroes, right? The problem is that when you start doing it with supers, you have to worry about continuity and the legacies and mythologies of the characters that come before, and making sure you're true to that crowd that is monthly comic book subscriber. They want their Batman. They don't need your detour into like what happened with your mother's Alzheimer's. But a lot of people do find a way to get those stories in with superheroes, which is extra impressive.
Totally.
What I think with Image and what I was saying, the company I was looking up that I've forgotten, much to my shame because I've been reading their stuff like crazy, is First Second.
Okay.
Right? And that company has a lot of these books too, but it's funny because comics, and especially these insanely absurd books like Murder Falcon, become these, kind of stealth carriers of an insane amount of emotional truth, right? It's actually really impressive that you can get so much real world truth into a book that has all of this kind of surface absurdity. And I think it's just, well, people can say whatever they want about comics being childish and this and that. To me, it's just the most fun way to wrestle with things sometimes. I was having one of those kind of rough weeks and, battling some personal demons and whatever. And this book really just got me right where I was. It made me stop and have pause while also giving me a super fun book I couldn't put down. I just read it all in one run through. But yeah, I mean, it's a great era for that, man.
Yeah.
So we do have to talk about something important, though, on this week.
I do?
Yeah, it's super important.
What?
Or do you have something you were reading that you would like to discuss past She-Wolf before we move on?
I don't even remember what I was supposed to talk to you about that's important. But I actually I still have the Marvel Unlimited app. It's amazing the things you sign up for and forget until they actually are charged to your credit card, and you're like, oh, I still have that. So I still have the Marvel Unlimited app, and I read Immortal Hulk on it, actually, mainly. But the one book I was really looking forward to was Spider-Man Life Story, which is this Chip Zdarsky run where he did like a book per decade of like the life of Spider-Man. And it's interesting we're talking about this because I do think Spider-Man's like the perfect character.
It's only 4 books. He dies in his 40s. It's like, well, that was a shocking ending.
He's like the perfect character though to graft all of our worldly frustrations on because he deals with our worldly frustrations on the rig, So Life Story is basically decade by decade of what like Spider-Man's life is like, and the first one takes place in the 60s during like the height of the Vietnam War, and has a lot to do with the introduction of like the Green Goblin. But the thing that I was really interested in was the way Zdarsky writes this is that it ends up being this story really about Spider-Man kind of trying to justify to himself why he's not joining the war effort, which is something that I think probably a lot of people were wondering about when those comics were coming out. Is like, why are these? Because much like World War II, Captain America was propaganda. Like that was the perfect Superman too. So it's interesting that we didn't focus a little bit more on what the Vietnam War was, and Spider-Man's a great example. Spider-Man was in his 20s. He was in college. He absolutely would have been drafted. So like they're focusing mainly on Spider-Man's trying to get through the day, trying to make it to Flash Thompson's going away party because Flash Thompson actually volunteers. He hasn't been drafted. He volunteered for the Vietnam War. And so he shows up and gives Flash like a rash of shit like they always do. They go back and forth. And then Gwen's like, is that really the last thing you want Flash to say? Is that really the last thing you want Flash to know you said to him? And Peter's like, well, you're right. I was kind of shitty about it. And he walks over to Flash Thompson. And he's like, hey, I'm very sorry. Like, that's all I have to say. I think what you're doing is really honorable. He goes, I'm just trying to, do what my hero would do. And he's like, who's your hero? And he's like, well, Spider-Man. Spider-Man totally would go if he could. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, well, Spider-Man's got to, he's helping us out here. I mean, that's what he's doing. Like, he's doing all he can to help us here. I'm going to go across the world and help them. Like, that's the kind of thing, though, when I read those kinds of things. And again, Chip Zdarsky's a hilarious writer, a great artist, but like, that to me strikes a chord a little bit differently than what I'm used to from him. But what I love about it is that's exactly what comic books and comic book heroes should be doing. Like, if you're ever going to read a comic book and ever going to feel inspired, that's what it should be inspiring you to do, is become a better person, be like, contribute meaningfully to the world, even if it is to, as we found out, a senseless war like Vietnam. But like, that to me is the point of comics in general. Like, they're supposed to inspire you to do a little bit better than yourself. Is at least superhero books. Obviously, when you read, stuff like we were talking about, like God Country and Murder Falcon, there's a little bit different thing going on there. But I think the sentiment remains. Like, you want to be a better version of yourself. Like, you want to read these characters. You want to read these characters progressing the way you would feel you would progress. So I think ultimately, I'm going to keep reading it, but I absolutely love so far the first issue, and then obviously Spider-Man's a great character. And again, I've for some reason it's just been very Spider-Man heavy this week. I watched Into the Spider-Verse again and reading a lot of Bendis articles and stuff. So I don't know, if you haven't read it yet, check out Life Story. At least, I mean, obviously I've only read the first issue, but I think it's probably only going to get it better from there. So
yeah. To me, it's not about inspiring me to be better. What I like is a comic that forces me to participate in introspection.
There we go.
I think comics really force you to
participate.
We talked about this in that great book, Understanding Comics, right? McLeod did.
Right.
And he talks about how the gutter, as they call it, between the image panels, how much work your mind is doing there that you don't think about. So for me, I like comics that use that time in stillness of images, right? Like, I really like a big splash that kind of shows like a character lost in a page and forces me to do the work. So that's what I like. I like participation, forcing introspection.
You're right. Introspection's a better way to put it than like forcing us to be a better version of ourselves. Introspection, that's where I'd go.
Right.
Now, I'm very curious. What was an important thing I needed to talk about on this pod today?
Guy, I don't know if we can go see Joker, dude. I don't know. It might be over.
Are we doing that again?
I thought this was an interesting bit of fodder, right? As a massive horror movie fan, I feel like I've been dealing with this my whole life. So I thought I would throw this out to you, right? So things have gotten a bit teasty between Todd Phillips and some of the Joker crew. As far as I heard, even critics were disinvited from the premiere, like question-asking critics and stuff.
Right.
Joaquin Phoenix has had to defend Joker. I think
he walked out of an interview.
Well, he had the thing that I agree with, right? My sentiment as I sum up, I might be biased on this question, is it's not an artist's job to define or create morality for the audience, right?
Right.
The artist's job is to create emotional response to me, right? And I guess you could say that could be used for good or bad. That's kind of the crux of this whole thing. Todd Phillips came out, though, and made an argument, and Twitter was ablaze, and I'm actually kind of interested in this conversation. So his argument was, and he kind of went a little Joe Rogan-y on me, right? He's like, the extreme left, or whatever, right? That's how I'm like, oh, man, we're getting into this playing to the crowd, playing to the base kind of language, right? And what he said is he doesn't understand why John Wick does not get the same scrutiny as something like Joker, right? Because, I mean, he is right in the fact that I think I've seen John Wick kill 500 people, right?
That's a very low estimate.
Yeah,
I
mean, if you told me John Wick had killed 600 people in those movies, I'd be like, that's true. I did go to the bathroom a couple times. Like, there could be 100 kills I missed.
Right.
And then I read the counter argument on Twitter is, how the fuck can you say this in good conscience, right? It's intentionally misconstruing what his movie is on the basis of what John Wick is. Alex, explain to me, what is the difference in John Wick killing a bunch of people versus what people are assuming this Joker movie is? Because again, I don't know how many people have actually seen it that are having these fights.
See, this is the crux of the whole thing, and this is the problem. Like, this is the subjective nature of art. Is you see a trailer and you see images from a trailer out of context of the actual film.
Oh, let me add this, by the way. This is a real-world fucking story. The military, the United States military...
Very important. This is a very important wrinkle in the story.
They had to send out an alert to increase their awareness and preparedness level for possible incel, I guess, white virginal, right-wing lunatics who may cause violence because of this Joker movie. Yes. That is fucking... Has the United States military ever... Like, I remember my uncle telling me when he was younger, he went and saw The Exorcist, and that it was like this life-altering event, right? Just watching people in the theater unsure of everything in their life, right? They're like, is this real? Am I ever going to escape this theater? Are we going to be possessed? Crying, weeping, puking. But I didn't remember the part of the story where it was like, yeah, they're rolling tanks down Main Street over to the, the Appleton 6 or whatever. So this is getting out of control. But Alex, back to the point now that we got that interest. Honestly, I've never heard the military, like they let Human Centipede go without a military alert. I can't believe this is a thing. It could.
Well, I don't think anyone was afraid. I don't think anyone was afraid that a bunch of people were going to go to the movies and like, man, I'm going to sew a bunch of buttholes together for sure. Like that's like.
You're like, I feel like that would take enough time. I could probably roll away. It's like, no. I mean, to be fair, though, one more waiver or claim before we get into this. I will admit, I have actually thought maybe I should go in like the morning, like Friday morning. Right? Because it has crossed. I told you my story about Gen Con. I was like, there are a lot of these kind of guys I see in the news. I was worried about a shooter at Gen Con. I've had the thought, but I don't know if that's just because I keep reading this story. So back to the base point. Let's go. Let's build a pyramid. Joker versus John Wick, go.
Okay. To begin, I think I've had the same thought, honestly. Mainly because, I mean, I think if you go listen to Film Alchemist, my experience seeing Us in the theater was pretty much on par with that. I thought we were going to get shot at. There's literally a guy who stood up in the middle of the movie, like probably like 30 minutes in, like right before like the big like reveal, and he's like, "Celebrate black culture, celebrate black filmmakers, celebrate Jordan Peele. This movie fucking rules." And everyone's like, "Shut the fuck up, dude!" Yeah. But for the rest of the time, I'm like, why did he do that? Why is he like saying that before, and then why is he walking out?
Yeah.
What did he do? What's going on here? So that like distracted me from the movie quite a bit. So much to the point where I was like, I don't really remember what happened in the movie past like, I know that I should have seen I should have seen something that didn't happen. But
an ArcLight's one of those theater that sells booze. Anytime I'm in an alcohol theater, I get way more concerned when someone is getting unruly. I got attacked in the ArcLight during Thor Ragnarok. Same thing because a 120-pound guy had 5 beers.
Right.
It's scary at an alcohol theater.
I think about this like because I thought about that. Like in a way, he's right. There's a situation where, yes, when you look at it from an outsider's perspective, John Wick should probably have the same level of scrutiny. But here's the rub, and here's the thing that I think is very different. John Wick is a one-man band. I think for having not seen the movie, and I don't know anyone who's like actually seen it, but it seems that everyone believes that what's happening is the idea of the Joker, which he's an enigmatic character. People gravitate towards him. He gets people to do things that they generally wouldn't be doing, or he attracts like psychotic behavior to him. The idea is that this movie might be romanticizing that behavior somewhat. Right. So the idea of incel culture would be a big part of this.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't seen the movie, so my initial reaction was like, well, what grounds do you have to think of that?
Well, I don't think any of the people having the debate have seen it. We're just weighing in on the cons. This is the thing. I wondered is it just because Keanu's like the internet boyfriend? We're like, oh, he can murder people because,
No, I really think there's a strong difference between John Wick and this.
I think the other thing in John Wick is you watch that movie, and most people are like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do rolling karate gunfighting, right? There's a level of training that makes it so fictional to most people's mind, right? You can't fantasize about that.
Not only is there a level of training, there's a level of just storytelling that's so heavily fictionalized. Like, look, I am not a deep state person, but I'm certainly sure.
Oh,
I mean,
fuck.
to
Are
a
we doing
degree,
conspiracies?
I personally don't think there's a hotel in the world that's meant for assassins only, and everyone gets in with gold coins.
You
like,
fucking rube.
That just seems ridiculous.
If
to
there
me. But at
was
the
that
same time,
hotel, the first thing they would do is make a movie to
I
where
also
guys
think
like
it's
you are
very-
like, that's crazy.
I also think it's very difficult to like kill someone on a horse from a motorcycle. Like that seems very difficult. But that's me. I don't know enough about horsepower and motorcycle power to know the difference.
I feel like
But-
everyone who gets on a motorcycle could die at any time. By the
Right,
way,
exactly.
I've noticed this. I live in the Midwest. The amount of people that ride motorcycles without helmets,
It's pretty insane.
that's crazy. Like, and they just keep surviving. That's madness.
I really don't think that. Like, I think the argument comes from what they believe is the romanticizing of the Joker's situation, which is a mentally ill man who's able to manipulate people into believing that, hey, you guys are also sort of the forgotten, so maybe come with me and we'll be forgotten together and we'll remind people not to forget us. Like,
Right.
The idea is that, I mean, more to the point, I also think there's an issue with, there should be, like, if we're going to do this whole thing where it's inciting incels to, come out of the woodwork, I mean, why are we also not saying,
it's
hey,
called basement work
this
for
is-
them. Basement work.
this is deeply rude towards the mentally ill. Like there's a mentally ill issue going on here that no one's addressing, which is so all mentally ill people are gonna like inspire Joker like behavior.
Yeah.
There's
The
There's a
mentally
bunch of
ill
different
argument
little
is
things.
hard, right? Because to me, it's like anyone who goes out and does these acts is somewhat mentally ill, right?
Yes.
I feel like that's one of those things that we use so that we don't have to address the problem, right? You're like, they're not murdering us with toasters, right? Like there's multiple parts to the conversation, but on a base level, aren't all these people dealing with mental? To keep this without getting political and things we don't fucking understand, right? Like I'm
Sure.
not claiming I have any information on this. This is just gut feelings. My question is, this was a year where we had 3 Charlie Manson movies or a show in movies? That's a cult leader who through his unstable behavior, being shunned by the world,
Sure.
right? A kid who grew up in the system, was kind of built to be this monster. He's a perfect mix of mental instability, bad family, lost in the system, gathered a cult, who then went out and committed actual horrific real-world murders.
Like, I'm not saying that people like this don't exist. Like, obviously, people like this exist in the real world.
Yeah,
We've
no.
seen it happen.
I understand that. I'm saying, but people want that movie to win Oscars and are talking about it as the most brilliant movie of Tarantino's career. I think that more than John Wick is kind of the interesting analog.
Well, I also
and that
think
movie
the
has a
difference is,
shockingly
like, that movie,
violent ending.
right? But I also think that movie, I would say glorifies Hollywood violence much more than it glorifies what I think probably people are seeing as like real world violence. Like,
Right.
It's not difficult to go out and buy a clown mask and be a creep. It's really difficult to be Brad Pitt. I think we can all agree. Like, it's bad. It's hard to be Brad Pitt. It's really hard to be Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, these people are not normal. So getting to be those people is that's a pipe dream. But putting on a clown mask and being an asshole is probably fairly simple. Like,
Right.
I've seen people do it. If you go to fucking Halloween Horror Nights, they're all over the place.
But okay, so
truly-
Halloween Horror Nights, this is the interesting analog, right? Because I watch so many horror movies. I've seen so many horrific, terrible. I've seen cult murders. I've seen, I just watched The Last Exorcism, right? Fantastic, unheralded gem, which might be my extra Film Alchemist movie. Who knows? I'll spring it on you at the last second. Yeah. That's the face I live for, is Alex being like, why do you do this to me? But that movie's all about kind of a cult, sexual abuse, this and that, horrific murders at the end, right? You've got so many movies about serial killers. This is the thing. With horror movies, it's almost like they just put us to the side and it's like, well, those freaks, they're over there doing that. But it's like, there is this weird thing in the horror community where it feels shockingly well adjusted for the kind of things we watch.
Right. Well, this is okay. I really think this is in the lens of 2019, where we've just had arguably one of the biggest superhero years ever in comic book movie history.
Sure, yeah.
So I think the real problem here is that what Todd Phillips made was Taxi Driver under the guise of a comic book movie. That's the way it looks. That's the way it feels when I see the trailer. Like, that's what I get. I think the problem is that this is a mass marketed movie, so a lot more people are going to see it than say maybe like, because look, Scorsese's been making movies like this for years. I don't know why anyone's like freaked out. Like, I fucking watch Taxi Driver. It's the same thing. The Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino did the same thing. Like, it's fucking terrifying. What about First Blood? Yeah. Rambo came back from the war and was fucked up and literally just started killing people. Like, that's like, it's all the same. It's all the same.
Down. This is a pretty standard kind of movie.
This is a pretty what's the difference is that we glorify superheroes, so automatically it has the twinge of it's a superhero movie. But it's not. It's about the bad guy. And it's not the Suicide Squad, so there's no music video involved. So it's just a story about all it is a story about a guy who has who's had a really bad day. And we all can relate to that. And again, Falling Down, First Blood, Taxi Driver, The Deer Hunter. Like, we all can relate to these stories.
There are kind of 4 or 5 points you make that I think are really. One is it is the comic book thing, right?
It's absolutely the comic book thing.
But what I would say is, one, it's the Joker. It needs to have its own vision, and, he's a bad guy.
He's a terrible character.
Yeah. The other thing you latch on, I think there's also kind of the comic book community, right, has been kind of ripping apart for the past couple years, right? Yeah. There's kind of your comic books, my thing, you're not welcome, don't change anything, fuck you guys.
Right.
And then we want everything as diverse and welcoming as possible crowds, right? Which I think most comic book fans fall into. They're like, just give us great work. You know what I mean? Do whatever the fuck you want. And so I think this movie really triggers both sides of that chasm, right? But it's a tough call.
This is the Comic Gates guys like wet dream movie. Like, if all those guys aren't in the theater just like masturbating to the intention.
Yeah, because if all of us comic book people are like, we have to sit in a theater with those people, right? That's what it feels like the biggest part of this debate is. But here's another point, right? Everyone keeps doing the Taxi Driver analogy. I didn't watch Taxi Driver and find Travis Bickle a hero.
No. Like, this is a hugely important point. Nobody watched those movies. Like, there's no one in those movies. Like, look, even Rambo, who I think is... Rambo's a fucking badass. Like, we watch Rambo movies. Rambo, to me, is not a hero.
Rambo should get the death penalty at the end of that movie.
Rambo should be dead, like, a long time ago. The fact that a Rambo movie came out this year is like a great example of like the impropriety of movie justice. It's like, oh wow, well, this guy just went to Burma, so we gave him amnesty. It's insane.
Well, no, it's also like, this is what happens if you don't give Rambo the death penalty. Somewhere down the road, he's going to go for Last Blood and just become Jason Voorhees. Yeah. If people are like, this is I guess that's the hard part, right? Is there probably will be some people that watch this and do see him as kind of a heroic figure. I guess that's the hard, but here's
that's
an interesting
a ridiculous
comic
argument.
book
You can
analog, right? What about V for Vendetta?
Right. You can lionize anybody. Like, V is a terrorist through and through.
Right.
But
because we don't like his government, right? It's
watch the movie and
bad.
The movie makes him quite the hero. Like, the book is a little more ambiguous about it, but he's like a full-blown terrorist. Like, there's no bones about it. Like, he just
right. Well, the thing about V too is he's fighting against this government and their thought control and this and that, but in a way, he's kind of engaging in the exact same activity. He just thinks his views are more just.
This is about the right to thought versus the right to live. Like, there's a whole like V for Vendetta is a different analog.
Damn, why have we not done that yet on Book Club? We got to add that.
But in any sense, I think because of the year and the era we're in of comic books and the era we're in of movies, particularly a movie like The Joker, arouses suspicion because of the Dark Knight Rises issue, which the tragedy in Aurora, Colorado, of course, is the first thing everyone goes to. Is like, oh, see, this already happened with the Batman movie. I'm like,
yeah. And Todd Phillips was even saying that was essentially debunked. He wasn't there as the Joker. even then, it's still a tragedy.
No, Aurora police have denied every single time they bring that up, because he was like, someone said he was quoted saying like, I did it because I'm the Joker, which Aurora police said that never was said, and no one ever said anything like that. But even then,
he picked that movie for a reason.
Of course,
right?
Because he knew there's going to be a lot of people there. Like,
but yeah, I mean, he could have gone to fucking Twilight.
Yeah,
probably would have had as many people. He chose this is the hard thing, right? Is the world is shifting around us a lot, right? And it's hard to. I think we all get in this cycle where everything we read and see on the news seems bad. We were talking before the show that we were actually reading on Twitter about a new American Civil War. Such
There's
fucking
second
guts
Civil
in.
War is trending.
Yeah, that we're like, this is a good idea, not one of the most horrific, terrible things that ever happened. Like, that's where we're in, right? So the hyperbole of the internet era has made us kind of numb to how everything's bad, everything's fucking scary.
I mean,
well, the world as a whole might not be, but when the landscape shifts, I don't know what the movie's responsibility is to that.
Well, like today I read, like I was reading a lot about the Second World War, Civil War thing, because I'm like, what's the deal here? So I was reading a lot about it. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of like historians and a lot of writers who say, arguably, you could say we're already in a second Civil War. We're just, I think it might. I mean, I can't believe I'm about to quote this guy. I think fucking Rush Limbaugh might have said like it's a culture war, like it's a cold Civil War.
Well, because that sounds sexier. What it is a bunch of it. This is the first time that America's morbid obesity has actually been a huge benefit for us.
Sure. Look, I mean, it's something that cranks ratings, of course, but at the same time, there is some credence to that, because we're in a situation where, yes, like we were laughing before the show. We were like, can you imagine just like I was making a joke about like, first send the garrison of rascal scooters, and then we'll go to Shoney's, like that kind of thing. Like it's like we're making those jokes, but at the same
post-battle chocolate fondue fountain at Golden Corral.
Right. Like, we're making those jokes because, I mean, honestly, like, think about it. Like, I perceive the whole of American culture as, like, and I'm part of it. Like, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but it's lazy.
Think you're better than me?
You know, be honest. Like, lazy. Like, look, I have a friend who after college signed up to be in the National Guard. I have a couple of friends in Marines. Like, those guys, not lazy at all. Me, lazy, for sure.
Almost,
like,
it's insane, but this is where it gets to, right? Like, there are always going to be those people in societies.
Absolutely.
Right? And now, I mean, you could say maybe because of the age we live in, they're more driven to commit these acts because of the notoriety and the dark internet subcultures that kind of grandize this behavior. Does that mean that we can't have a different look at a character we've had for so long? Right? Like, to me, once you've read The Killing Joke, we've seen, I mean, he fucking murdered a Robin with a crowbar.
Well, like,
we've seen this with the Joker if you've been reading this.
Right. I mean, The Killing Joke actually is a wonderful example of, I mean, there was a huge edit at the end of that book. Alan Moore, they put it back in years later, but Alan Moore wrote a postscript to that book about a random regular guy who was like, why did all these guys go through all this trouble to kill him? I'll show you how to do it. And literally the panel is him from afar blowing Batman's brains out as it's like perched on a rooftop. Like, this isn't new stuff. Like, people have been like that forever. And also, I mean, that's Alan Moore. Like, that's how his brain works. So that should probably clue you into how fucked up he is. But at the same time, like, it's one of those things where like, it's not a new story. Like, the Joker and anyone that is inspired by someone like the Joker clearly has some issues. But again, like,
do you think? Let me ask you this: if this movie had Batman, who I would argue Batman is he is the psychological trauma stone that hits the Gotham waters, right? We talk about that all the time.
Totally.
But we give Batman a pass because he's just punchy, right? He's like, oh, just snap some fucking arms and break some spines. He's a pretty bad, shitty guy, too, if you really stop and break down a lot of this.
He's terrible.
If Batman were in this exact same movie, right, chasing the Joker down, does it matter? Is it just because the Joker is the main character?
Oh, 100%. I think that has a huge to do with it.
Like let's say this was the start of a trilogy, and Joker still gets away. He still wins the day. He's on the loose. He's committed a horrific crime, but we know Batman's chasing him down.
Oh, yeah. I think
does that give you the separation from the source?
100%. Because
I mean, imagine
now we're
Nicholson's Joker, right? His plan was what?
because now we're not seeing what we're not seeing. Batman doesn't like. Yeah, there are people like Phoenix Jones in Seattle and like people who like call themselves superheroes in real life, but we're not seeing those people very often on the news. What we are seeing a lot is people who feel invigorated by the divide in this country, who decide to pull out guns and shoot people, and that's very apparent because it's in the news all the time. So that's why Joker, his own movie, which kind of lionizes himself as this, like, you know, kind of, I guess you could call him poor man's Travis Bickle, as it seems from the trailer. Again, I haven't seen the movie, but like, that's a huge deal. I think if Batman was in the movie, it takes it right out of the real world. So you're just like, oh, well, it's two guys fighting. That's why no one that's why no one like broke into art houses and painted all over people's shit after watching 1989 Batman.
Yeah, because, I mean, Nicholson was still this horrific guy. He murdered a guy with an electric buzzer. Very creepy, very abusive, melts his girlfriend's face. He's going to murder everyone with gas balloons. But this cartoonish level of it where it's okay. I think it's strange. I mean, yeah, I don't know, because it's the hard line. You need your villain to really believe he's on a path and make him horrifying. The line in the trailer that I latch onto is he's like, I thought my life was a tragedy, but in fact it was a comedy. A lot of people are like, see, he doesn't care about his... I was like, to me that just means he's a fucking joke.
That just means he's Pagliacci. That's like the whole point of the... Yeah. That's the whole point of that. Like they tell that joke in Watchmen movie, but like it's in the book, but it's the same, like, it's the same sentiment. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, yes, he's Pagliacci. He's the sad clown. That's part of life. Like, that's what he is. Like, that's the tragedy of the real world. It's the tragedy of life in general.
Yeah.
So, like, I really think, like, if you're, first off, the military's catching on the dark web that, like, people are like, yeah, some unnamed movie theater. Like, that's very bad. That's not great.
I'm honestly horrified that it's going to happen. And this is the weird thing, too.
Me too.
It's almost the tail wagging the dog. Is this gotten stirred up so much that now one of these fucking lunatics is like, oh, well, you know, look at this. He's been reading about it for fucking 4 months.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, you like, I look at...
That's the scary... Because now, even, again, I am pro seeing this movie. I think you should be able to make whatever kind of movie you want to tell a tale.
Totally.
And now I think about it. It is in the back of my mind, right? If I see some fucking guy walking in dressed like it's the Matrix, I'm going to be like, well, fuck.
I'm out.
You know? At least I can get my fat bod in front of, you know, whoever I go with.
Well,
right?
No, that's exactly... I mean, I was talking with Andrea about this
That's a sad
like
fucking
2
thing
weeks
to
ago.
even think about. It's fucking embarrassing and sad.
I was talking with Andrea about this 2 weeks ago, and I told her, like, oh, yeah, I've been reading. Like, people are, like the military's involved now. They think there's some incel thing. They're going to shoot a bunch of people. And she goes, cool, so we're not seeing that movie. I'm like, I have to see it for the show. And
you have a kid now. It's like, yeah.
I know, but, like, she said that, and, like, that, like, I mean, like, she didn't laugh it off. Like, she felt, like, like, whoa, that's fear. Like, we're actually experiencing now, like, I shouldn't fear going to the movie theaters. No one should.
No.
And I shouldn't fear going to the movie to see something like this. And yet, here I am, like, maybe I should, like, maybe we should figure out a way around this. Like, what's going on?
I'm telling you, we need to be able to buy movies week of for $50 in our home. Especially now. Like, Jesus Christ. It's a sad state of affairs that just being in public with other people has become this sad time. Because that's what I mean, again, to take it back to my horror movie brethren, I watched a movie last night where this lady was possessed, this nurse, and she's just running around a nursery just slaughtering these newborns with a fucking giant knife.
Right.
And I was sitting there, I was like, why do you watch these things? This is so horrible. You're like, but I don't have murderous urges, you know? I mean, that's what my buddy said on our Nightmare on Elm Street. He's like, because I failed the serial killer personality test. He's like, oh, well, you have all the serial killer traits, but you watch so many horror movies, you get your fixins. Right? And I mean, it's a joke, but it is fucking, it's just sad and scary, man, that this is the shit we have to talk about. We're going to get to see Joaquin Phoenix be the Joker, man.
Yeah, honestly,
that's
like,
what is so fucking depressing about all this.
I'm so fucking psyched to see Joaquin Phoenix be the Joker, and yet it's just filled with, like, for instance, he was talking about, I was reading this Todd Phillips interview. He was on the Wrap, and he said, I literally described to Joaquin at one point to those 3 months, in those 3 months as like, look at it as a way to sneak a real movie in the studio system under the guise of a comic book film. It wasn't, we want to glorify this behavior. Like, That's what I want to see. We always talk about that on this show. Like, how badass would it be to see like that kind of movie? Like, we always have like those fun, like we have these fun lists where we talk about, oh, how cool would it be if like Green Lantern was Apocalypse Now. None of us have ever thought, oh, you know what we should do? Let's fucking go up, like let's go up the Colorado River. Yeah. Let's go Colonel Kurtz like somewhere in America. Like, none of us are thinking like that. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, that's a cool idea. But what's not cool is everyone going to see that movie and be like, I should do that. Like, no one's thinking that.
Yeah, I like to use movies.
It's scary.
Yeah, movies to me is where I wrestle with monsters in the dark in a safe space. You know what I mean? That's what I was saying about things like Murder Falcon. Like, I like books that take me to kind of sad, dark. I want to elicit emotional response and thought and, you know, engage with the reality that I live in, man. And
100%.
And again, I read an article today that, you know, it's just that Joker is one of the big problems with it is it's so self-indulgent. It's so nihilistic. There's no hope, no joy. It's just this constant whatever. That's someone's opinion.
Sure.
You know, I'm not going to take that for what it is, but I honestly, in my heart, I was like, I hope we're not sitting here next week and have to address some fucking lunatic, you know, going out into the world and just fucking destroying someone under the guise of this movie gives me credit to do it or an excuse to do it, right? Because I don't think we should be in the world where we're just censoring art and speech. And, you know, I think we got to be able to put ideas and depictions of scary people out there. And, you know, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, even this whole conversation, I think we tried to, like, answer some questions. I just leave it and I'd be like, what a fucking ridiculous world where two guys who just want to talk about comic books and the Joker, how can you not address this, right? Like, you and me both, who have children and wives and family, are going to the theater, and we both separately thought, could happen. That is a fucking sad and ludicrous state of affairs. That just two fucking dummies that read funny books have to take time out of our comic book pod because this is just the biggest thing happening right now.
It's sad, and it's also very scary because I want to participate in culture and I want to be a part of something cool and I want to see something cool like that when I've asked for it for so long, and for people to come along and take, really honestly, like, this is about taking the joy from it. Like, taking the joy from an experience that should be something worth watching, something really worth seeing. It's not just this huge, look, we talked about Endgame is an amazing thing to see because you're like, oh my God, all these heroes in one place. Like, but this is also, I want to see something I haven't seen before. And that's definitely this movie.
And also, like you said, with the Alan Moore killing joke and this and that, sometimes it's fun. And like Murder Falcon, right? I know we keep coming back, but comic books have a great ability to let us go into dark places and kind of cocoon us. You know what I mean? Right. We still experience that and you still grapple it, but there's this extra level of, oh, that's the Joker. I've had the Joker my whole life. He is a safe devil for me to play with. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
You know, sometimes you watch the news and that's too much. It's too real. I'm like, fuck, I'm not one of those guys that likes to see crime scenes. Like, anytime I see a news truck and they're shooting a house where something horrific has just happened, I'm out, man. Like, I remember there was this fucking movie. I can't remember what it was now. Maybe Hollywoodland. It was about these gruesome murders in Hollywood way back when, right? I can't remember the name.
I think you're thinking of that movie, you know, the one about John Holmes.
Yes.
It's called Wonderland.
Wonderland, that's it. And on the DVDs as an extra, I was stumbling through, and they had the actual fucking crime scene. And I just remember watching, like, oh, is this like the pre-production? Or are they like building the set? I was kind of confused as to what it was. Next thing you know, I'm just staring at a murdered body. And I was like, well, fuck this movie. I don't want this. Like, fuck it. You know? But that shit is real and it's out there. And, you know, art used to be how we could deal with this and have these conversations. And, you know, maybe there's some kid who's having bad days, man, and people are more cognizant of not being a piece of shit. But, you know, that's all I'm saying, man. I don't know if we're getting anywhere or we're just spinning our wheels. I just hope at the end of the day that next week we're reviewing the Joker movie and everyone who went to see it is just safe. And we're arguing about whether it's a good movie or not. And we're arguing
I
about
think
the Joker as a character, not these fucking real life guys that want to, give everyone else the worst day of their life. That's what I hope.
It's the hope we all have, and it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be having this debate, but we have to because we don't know what next week's going to look like, and that's like the bigger deal. So.
It's scary because I know we're the show that's always like, we hope that we can do some more adult stuff with our comic book movies. I just hope that we learn that, we can still do that, man. There doesn't have to be these high costs, and everything's not a fucking battlefield we all have to fight each other to the death on, man. It can just be a movie about a bad clown, hopefully. Fucking hopefully.
In any sense, guys, if you feel that you are if you're a little nervous about going to the movie theater, please, for the love of God, stay home.
Fucking don't
go. We'll tell you what it's.
Don't go.
Don't go. We'll tell you if it was good or not. What you should do is go to the comic book shop and pick up Murder Falcon, Life Story Spider-Man, any of the books we've talked about today. Yeah. Those are all there, and that's a safe, loving, warm environment.
And then you come on over, you roll on over to the old film Alchemist, and you let us walk you through hundreds of murders throughout the course of October. We're going to walk you through.
Truth.
I mean, Jason's killed John Wick numbers of people through his 11 movies. This is something I realize that you guys will see if you follow us through to Jason X. By Jason's blade, he kills a pilot of a spaceship who then crashes his spaceship into a giant spaceport, right? A space station. The whole fucking thing blows up. And I was like, how many people were on that fucking thing? Thousands. That's just not even added in Jason's body count. That's how many murders we're going to be doing in October.
You can also catch us back here, of course. We're going to do the long Halloween this month for our book club.
Yeah.
And
Constantine.
Constantine's
Long Box
going to
and
be
Chill.
the long
Keanu
box and chill,
Constantine.
guys. I'm very excited for this month. I'm very excited. I'm going to muster the courage to go see the Joker. I might definitely go see it in the morning.
Go early. Go with the coffee. Early. That's my advice, guys.
Go early. Go with the coffee. Guys, we hope that you are having a wonderful week, of course. And please, as always, rate, review, and subscribe. Tell your friends about our shows. We love doing it. Go to the Nerd Alchemist.
Plural, S at the end. Nerd Alchemists.
Nerd Alchemists. We're on Twitter now. We have a Twitter account, and then, of course, our YouTube account, which hopefully you're watching here.
Instagram, Facebook, we got it all, baby.
Guys, thank you for listening. From the Long Box Sessions, I'm Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
Stay safe, guys. Jeez.
Ridiculous.